We're here to talk about development and apps and all this other great, wonderful stuff. I'm Chris Givens, and I am the CEO, co-founder of a company called Architecting Systems. We build training courseware that Microsoft training partners deliver all around the world. So I'm normally on the SharePoint side of things. I'm a SharePoint server MVP, so this is my first project server conference. And I can tell you, I love it. Like, wow. The people are completely different, and I like it. You guys are very business-focused, which is awesome. Even the developers are business-focused. I live in lovely San Diego, which is like 1 hour away. Yep, I got some San Diego people here. So after this, I'm just going to drive home. So sorry, you guys got to hop on a plane.
Yeah.
But I also am the author of a couple of different books, as well as I did some tech editing for some. So we're going to have a question, and later I have this football, and I'm going to do my best to not mimic Peyton Manning, so hopefully I'll get a pass to somebody. But I'm going to give this book out. It's an architecture book for SharePoint, so a lot of you guys, dev side, you got to set up your dev environments. This will help you out. So pay attention, because the answer will be hidden somewhere in our slides. But other than that, my background in terms of project server, I've been the senior architect at a couple of big companies. So eBay was one of them up in San Jose, and then General Atomics down in San Diego. Yeah, woo, got a General Atomics person here. And of course, you know eBay. General Atomics, if you don't know, they do a lot of stuff, but mostly they're famous for the Predator plane, which is really famous and sometimes good, sometimes bad. But the particular things I've done I do a lot of IT pro type of stuff, so migrating these 2003, 2007, 2010s into single environment. Yay, it's awesome work. You're a consultant, you get paid, you learn a lot of stuff. So I've had some experience. I've done a lot of programming with product server to do some customizations. So I am a developer though, even though I did a lot of that. And so that's a lot of my focus, and that's why I'm here with Bill, because he is awesome, by the way. There you go.
All right. So I'm Bill Avery. I'm a developer on the project team in Redmond. I work right about there. And in addition to my day job, I also have a couple of apps that I've released in the store for free. We might show you a little bit of this later if there's time. And let's see. There we go. So I'm a senior developer at Microsoft. I've been on the project team for the last 3 years or so. That's out of almost 16 years now at Microsoft. Last release, I led the developer team, which was responsible for most of the server and online extensibility points. So we worked on project server CSOM, workflows and demand management, app packaging, and remote event handlers. So the agenda for today is pretty much all of those things that I just listed. We're interested in showing you what you can use to get solutions that you might have developed for on-prem project server to work in the cloud. So we're going to talk a bit, sorry. There we go. We're going to talk a bit about the different project server APIs that are available. We're going to talk a bit about the REST architecture that lays on top of that. We're going to talk some about remote event handlers, how to pick the right app model for the type of solution that you want to build. And if there's time, we'll try and get in a little bit about how you can actually package project server entities into an app. So, as I mentioned, we have a lot of APIs for project server. Most of them you're probably familiar with in the PSI space from project server on-prem development. We still have the PSIs, but the authentication is a bit tricky online. So we have some additional APIs that you can use for more app scenarios. We've added a server object model for programming on the server, and then that's exposed through a client-side object model and a JavaScript object model, and also a REST API projection. So with all of these APIs to choose from, you have a lot of options to use whatever you're most comfortable with or whatever works best with the platform you're targeting. So the PSI interfaces are a collection of, and this is probably old news to most of you, but they're a collection of ASMX and WCF SOAP services. You can see a listing there. There we go. You can see a listing there on the right, and you can use Visual Studio, or if you want the service util command line utility to generate .NET proxies for them. You can probably generate a proxy for them in other ways too, but if you want, you can also reference the assemblies that come with the Project Server SDK. So the server object model is new in Project Server 2013, and you can use it on-prem. If you want to, you would use a reference to Microsoft.projectserver.dll in addition to the SharePoint Server OM, which is in Microsoft.sharepoint.dll. From that, we build the .NET client-side object model. And just like we have some additional DLLs that go with the SharePoint version, we have the Microsoft.projectserver.client.dll. And if you include a reference to that and to the SharePoint assembly and the SharePoint runtime assembly, you can get up and running in a .NET app. Anytime you make a call through that proxy, it basically generates an XML script, which it sends to the process query endpoint. So we also have a JavaScript object model, which acts much like the .NET client-side object model. It's just that it's all been translated into somewhat idiomatic JavaScript. So for instance, the casing is changed, and properties have a get at the beginning and things like that. All of the JS files have a debug version, which you'll want to use anytime you're in active development, because they haven't been minified, and minifying them makes them practically unreadable. So the one that you want to add to get the project server stuff is ps.js. Make sure you also include sp.js and any other SharePoint JSON files that you want to reference.
And one thing to add, Martin here in the front. Raise your hand, Martin.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right through Martin. He's going to do a JSON session later today, one of the last sessions of the day. So we're not going to delve into all the JavaScript stuff, but he's going to do it later.
Right.
Battery.
No, battery's still there. Oh, there it goes.
Oh. Okay.
All right. And then finally, this API is projected into a REST endpoint, and it follows the OData protocol. So with this, you can construct URL query parameters. You can construct posts and deletes and things like that to update entities or read entities without having to build a proxy for them at all. This is by far the most portable API endpoint. It's the simplest to get started with, but it's a little tricky to figure out exactly how the object model maps to it. So Chris is going to talk a little bit about that. So we have two web services here besides REST. We have the PSIs and we have the CSOM. I like to compare them to the difference between beer and wine. They both pretty much do the same thing, but people's preferences differ in terms of which they'd rather be using. Some of the advantages of the PSIs, they're very, very rich, and they have a lot of support for things that you might be relying on. Of the 26 or so PSI endpoints, we have roughly 12 corresponding collections in CSOM that you can use. The ones that we targeted are the ones that we think are most important to the app model that you might use with a team member, for instance, submitting status or updating tasks, things like that. We left out most of the administrative type APIs. The PSI WCF services, however, don't support OAuth, which means that if you want to package using them in an app, you have to find a way to authenticate the calls by logging in as the user. The APIs for PSIs, in my opinion, also tend to be more complicated because they tend to return large data sets, and it's like you're querying the database directly. Whereas the CSOM is an object model. You can access collections of entities and access properties off of them. And it's much more like you might be used to programming other interfaces.
So all of those wonderful APIs that Bill has worked so hard on. This is the part, for those of you that came in, we kind of preempted everybody that was here. But we're kind of curious what everybody uses right now. Do you kind of still stay on that server-side object model, the PSI? Do you do the .NET, or do you JSON? Do you do REST? I guess that was probably Martin on the JSON part. You can do your phone. You just do one of those codes, and you send that code to 22333, and we'll see it update dynamically. Or if you don't want to pay the 75 cents or $1 if you're from out of the country, yeah, okay. You can just go online, and you can hit pollev.com/givencj, and you'll see all my polls. And so you'll be able to do a little vote there. So we'll see. We'll give you guys like 10 more seconds to go do your little items there. Well, that's pretty even. Oh, we got a race.
Yeah.
Who? I'm liking it. Oh, you guys are all over the board. Nobody does .NET client side? Really? Oh, there we go. Whew. All right. Sweet. Awesome. Wow, okay, all right. So it's all balanced out here.
Incidentally, just, not to unfairly sway the audience here, but the .NET CSOM stuff is pretty useful if you're actually developing a service that you want to talk to project.
Ooh, all after my hearts. I love PSI. Love PSI. Okay, so thank you very much for doing that. And if you're going to keep going, and keep voting, you can. But so now that Bill has outlined all these wonderful APIs that exist today, there's this architecture. As Bill was writing all his code, he had to piggyback off of SharePoint. They had provided a series of attributes that he could add to some server proxies that basically expose REST dynamically. Right? So, no, REST does not mean go to sleep. Okay, yes, do that. Cute baby. Although a lot of you probably wish you were in bed right now.
We did not pick the time for this session, by the way.
No, we didn't. No. So the REST architecture is awesome, right? So I'm one of those guys that goes in and kind of tears everything apart. Like, how did they do this? What did they do? How does it work? The way it works is inside of SharePoint, they used to have all the server object model code. And so what'll happen is, you got the class in there, SP Web, SP Site, and it's got methods, it's got properties. Well, all they did is they add attributes, right? .NET attributes to everything. And then basically what happens, they have some tools, and it generates your client side, your JavaScript. It generates all that stuff. So one of the interesting things, if we go and we say, a lot of you say, oh, this endpoint's not exposed, it's very easy for Bill or someone else on the SharePoint team to go and add the attribute, and then it's instantly exposed.
Particularly if it's already there in the server object model.
Exactly. So what does it kind of look like? Well, if you see here on this draft assignment, which is one of the objects inside of Project Server, you'll see that it has an attribute called client callable type, which has some properties to it. So in this case, it's server type ID. That's actually a really important ID, and I'm going to show you a tool, as Bill was mentioning. The REST services, it's kind of difficult for you to find the endpoints and things. Well, I built a tool that's going to help you do that. You'll find out that type ID is really important. When you look at the methods and some of the properties, you'll see that client callable method has been decorated on that method, which means that you can call that method from some kind of client side. By adding those attributes, again, they have a tool and it just generates everything. It's pretty sweet, right? That's very easy. So then we go and say, all right, well, I'm going to show you some code, do a little demo here in a second. I'm going to run through these slides, get these slides done. When we look at the REST endpoints, in terms of SharePoint, the SharePoint provides this base _ API, right? And so there's a whole series of things that come off SharePoint. When we talk about Project Server and the work that Bill has done, there's two endpoints there. There's Project Server and Project Data. Okay, Project Server is one of those things where you go in, you say, I want to modify, I want to add something, I want to delete something. Whereas the Project Data is, as Bill was saying, it's a direct link into the backend database. Okay. I'm not saying it's a direct. I mean, you can't go just do a connection string to the Project Online database or anything, but it's pretty close. It's pretty close. And as we've mentioned before, everything, the OData part just kind of gets layered on top of it, right? It's not like Bill had to go and do anything crazy with that. It's actually part of the REST architecture. When we talk about, like I said, the project data endpoint, there's a metadata endpoint for it. So if you have your Visual Studio and you go point it at, it'll actually generate a lot of the proxy classes for you, and you don't have to go and write your classes and do any of that. So it's very helpful to build those proxy things. You got to remember that when you hit these endpoints, the security maps whoever the user is, whatever's happening, whatever the app is. You got to think, when I get into like choosing an app model here in a few slides, you got to remember, if you try to hit an endpoint and that you can't see that stuff, obviously it's going to give you an access denied message for things, or you're just not going to see them. That being said, when we talk about REST, there's going to be all these endpoints, and I'll show you these endpoints here in a second. You got to remember a lot of these places where you start to go down the REST path, right? And you navigate, and you go and you say project / and it's got a GUID. It's got a long GUID. Then you go to tasks, and this got a GUID. And then you go to assignments, and this got a GUID. It starts to get pretty long. And then you throw on OData on top of it. Oh, that query string is getting pretty long, right? So keep in mind that query string limits are more of a factor of the browser than anything. So here's just some recent stats here on your kind of these limits and throttles. In IE, it's 2,000 characters. Firefox, 55. Safari, it's 80,000, right? So IE's slowly catching up. It's gotten better. When you go and you hit a REST endpoint, obviously if you have 100 projects, if you have 1,000, Verizon's like 200,000 projects, which is crazy. If you do a get to one of these endpoints, you're not going to get back 200,000 projects in that thing, right? So one of the things you have to realize is that when you're hitting these endpoints, they're only going to give you back a certain set of data. So a lot of the cases, the default is just considered 100. Okay, some of them are 200, but you can always change it using PowerShell. But this stuff, you're always going to have a limit. I mean, I suppose you could make it really big, but you don't want to give that power to people.
Yeah, be careful.
Yeah. So when you consider using REST, okay, or CSOM or whatever it might be, you have to consider that in the design of your app. That boom, you have to have some kind of paging to move through all of the data that you might get. Same endpoint, you just got to say, I want from 0 to 100, 100 to 200, right, move through there. So the endpoints, yay, so this is where we'll kind of jump over. I'm just going to say, hey, there's gets, there's posts, there's merges, and there's deletes, okay? So you'll have the slides, you can go back through these. So I just want to make sure, given the limited amount of time and all the stuff we want to do, I'm going to kind of blaze through these slides, and I'm going to jump over to my machine and actually show you a tool that I've written that makes a lot of these calls and does the rest. So you'll see it in Fiddler, and you'll see the JSON that's occurring. Computer went to sleep. All right. Ooh, look at all that PSI.
Yeah.
Sweet. All right. First thing I'm going to show you, like I showed you like a real quick like a little screenshot of the attributes. Here's the actual, this is .NET Reflector. How many of you use .NET Reflector? Every single hand should go up. If you don't have it, it's awesome. It is totally worth paying for. So I'm actually looking at Project Server Client, DLL. I'm looking at the draft project. You're going to see there's a script type tag that's there, and it has a server type ID. Like I said, the server type ID is very important for CSOM calls. But in addition, this draft project is actually defined multiple times. So you'll see here it's defined in the project server assembly. So if I go and I browse to that, you'll see the callable types that I was talking about. And this particular callable type has a lot of the different properties set for it. You can also see the callable exception constraints. You'll see callable method. And so the question, it's like, how do I know it's there? How do I know which things they've exposed? Well, I'm going to show you. I built a tool to help everybody in the community, and it's on the internet, and I'm making an app for it as well, so you'll be able to download it at some point. So that's kind of example there. Now the question is, all right, I want to go and do something like a migration from on-prem to O365 using REST. Can't be done fully, can't do it all. Bill is one man, and as much as he is a very good coder, it takes time, right? It's a zero-sum game in development, right? You do this, you do that, you only have so much time. So not all the things, like I said, administrative things you can't do. So you end up having to fall back to like PSI. Some things you can't do through PSI, so you end up doing other weird, crazy things. But I have some code here. It goes and it actually clears out a system, right? So I'm running this tool over and over again. So it's going to make delete calls, clearing out through REST, right? So I actually have, they gave us a nice O365 tenant. So you see here, project conference 303.sharepoint.com, right? And you'll see it's got some projects. Well, I moved these projects from an on-prem version of an Architecting Connected Systems site that I have. And I have some projects in here, and I'm a big Connect fan. You know, I like to develop Connect. And so what I've done is this tool, what I've done is I kind of run the tool, and I let it run for one project. So when I run the tool, it'll actually make REST calls to delete the project, delete any enterprise resources, and then it will make the REST calls to actually take from the on-prem and make the calls into the O365. So I've already done it. I'm not going to run the tool, but I already have the fiddler trace of what has occurred. Okay, so we're trying to be conscious of time, make sure we get through everything. So here is one of the endpoints that I'm making a call to. One of the things I have to do if I'm going to clear the O365, I have to figure out what projects exist. I have to figure out what enterprise resources exist. Right? So I make that call, and right here, if you go through Internet Explorer, you can actually go and in the browser, and I'll actually do this on my on-prem version, you can hit those REST endpoints. So here's the project server one. And it gives you back some of the data, right? It gives you some of the entities that you can call. So in this case, it's telling me I have this calendar endpoint, custom fields endpoint. Okay, and this is a manual way. If you're brand new, you didn't know about my tool, but you're going to find out about my tool here in a second. This is probably the way you're going to do this. You're going to look at it. You're going to try to browse it, right? So I could go /calendars, and it's going to tell me a bunch of data, but I'm not going to go there. The other thing, and those endpoints for project server are the ones where you do the adding, the deleting, the merging, the changing. If we look at project data, here we're going to see there's a bunch of different collections, and these, for the most part, map to the tables in the back end for each of these entities, right? So this is where you would take your Excel BI, as long as you can authenticate to this endpoint, and you would go pull this in, do your Power Query, do your Power Map, whatever, pull that data in and make your pretty reports, right? So you'll use this endpoint. Oh, are you question? Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Could you use something like you usually have that run as administrator in SharePoint in order to overpass the security issues if you want to get stuff from...
We're going to talk about auth. Yeah, we got a whole section on auth that we'll get to. Good question. Yeah, we'll come back. So those are the endpoints, right? So thing is, I did a get. If I go back to project server, we'll see that there's a /projects. So, okay, let's go to /projects. And, wow, okay, we get a whole bunch of XML back, right? So we have some of the project properties are getting returned back to us. And for every single project, they exist. It's going to have a GUID. And if you want to continue to scroll in and get to the data that exists for a project, here's its API entry point. So you could simply select that, and you go and you make that get. You do it, and now you're at the project level for that specific project, and now you can modify. You can see all the other endpoints like tasks and assignments and those types of things. Okay? Simple. That's a get. Gets a little more interesting when you have to do updates to things and deletions of things, right? It doesn't exactly work like you would think of other REST services. This is a get here. One of the things I have to do as a tool is in the target, I got to make sure everything's checked in. I find all the projects that I need to delete. And what will happen is, you'll see here, there's a special method, the exHTTP method, and it has delete in it. And I'm making a call to the endpoint I just showed you, right? So I know it's really tough to see. I don't think there's any way to make Fiddler.
By the way, if you don't have a proxy that blocks doing it, you can just set the HTTP verb up there instead of to delete.
Really? Mm-hmm. Oh, good. Look at that. He's my mentor. So in this case, yes. And then, does it do it for Share? I don't think. Does it do it for SharePoint too?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So this case, I'm doing it. I'm just doing a post, and I'm saying exHTTP method is delete to that specific project, and it's going to delete that project. Okay? Awesome. Now, later on, if I wanted to do an ad, we have some ads in here. And this is one of those things where, again, he is awesome. What you'll see in my tool is I expose all of the different REST endpoints, the methods you can call. In this case, and Bill kind of looks at it and goes, oh my gosh, why are you showing this? But I'm showing it to help guide you guys. So I'm calling the actual add method here. Okay, I'm calling the add method. And most people don't know that this works, but it does. The actual name of the add method, the parameter, is called parameters. All right, and it's got this list of properties. And what will happen, it's just kind of like a property bag. It'll try to do some type of reflection, and it sets the instance. And so I'll show you some things around that. But I'll say, hey, look, I want to create a project. Here's its ID. This is the type of project, right? Is it an enterprise project? Is it a SharePoint list task list project? And the name of the project, its description, its start date. Okay, yay. That's it. It passes in. It gives me back a JSON saying project is created. Now, the add endpoint only lets you pass those things in. If you just go straight to the project's collection and you do a add, it'll actually let you specify every valid project custom field to set. Yay! You don't make 2 calls, right? Chatty. You try not to make so many REST calls. So that's an add. And then if I wanted to do an update, I have a merge here. So it says XHTTP method is merge. And in this case, it's not really doing anything because I already called it Connect Project. But in this case, I'm saying, hey, I want to change the name to Connect Project. So if it was test or something before, it would actually change the name. And that's it. So you get them. You can do a merge. You can do a delete. Awesome. All right? Any questions about that aspect of things?
These are all queue operations, right?
Yes.
A lot of them, yeah.
So you don't really know what's going on.
Well, one of the collections, and I think you might be able to see it in here, is it's looking at the queue jobs collection off of the project. And so you can pull that and see what is the status of any queue jobs for that project until basically the count goes to 0. And at that point, you can move on.
Yes.
If you have a dependency on the queued job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. He says it's the same for
Just
PSI.
like using the PSI to do this.
If you made a call to create a project, you have to wait for the project to be created. If you do an update, you have to wait for the update to complete. Yeah. So I do that in my REST. I'm actually hitting it, parsing the JSON, going, oh, okay, yeah, there's a job. No more jobs. Yay, let's keep going. Right? Okay.
Can you say that one more time about the add that you're able to pass in more information? I ran into an issue
Right.
where if this is a required custom field at the project level, right? You can't call the add because it's a required custom field. So you also have to pass in custom field.
Right. So
Sure.
if you, a couple of things about custom fields on projects. There's a endpoint or a property on the project which is called include custom fields. By default, when you query the project collection, it omits all of the custom fields on the project. So if you want to get them, you'll need to look for that project and then / include custom fields. That version of the project will come back with all of the custom fields. You can update them, though, on the non-included one if you need to. The other thing is the add method. If you call the add method directly, then it takes a project creation information object. Whereas if you post directly to the collection URL, it will take essentially all of the properties that go onto a published project or onto that type of entity. So if you just drop the /add and you change the type of the JSON object you're passing in the metadata to published project, then you can pass all the properties you want.
Draft project.
No, in the case of adding, you're adding to the published project collection.
Okay.
Yes. Well, with the proxy, you would use add, and then you would update the properties and save it. And you would do all of that in one batch.
Yeah. So notice there's a nice little thing there. It says /draft /publish, and it says check-in equals true. It's like, well, how do I know that exists? How do I know the add exists? How do I know queue jobs exist? Well, you could go and hit in IE, and you could try to find everything, right? But it's not going to tell you about the publish method. off the draft, right? You're not even going to see the draft part. So just jump back over here, and you're going to love me. Hopefully you'll send me PayPals and be like, this is awesome, and you're just going to give me a lot of money, and then I can buy my wife shoes, and we're all going to be happy. Everybody's going to be love, peace. sprest.architectingconnectedsystems.com. I know it's a long URL. I have built a tool that allows you to navigate from either a low level and move up, or start at a top level and move down. Okay? Interesting.
And so that's basically automating the part that you were showing with .NET Reflector, right?
Exactly. So I'm going to switch back over, and I'm going to show you this tool. So jump over here. So originally, the intention is that a lot of the community MVPs on the SharePoint side, on product side, they go, I want parity. I want parity with PSI. I want parity with the server object model. Okay, the guys that say that, this is not, you do not want parity. No. And they're not going to give you parity, right? Not going to give you parity. But there are things missing. Like I said, Bill is one guy, right? And he only has so much time. And the other guy's in engineering. There's only a couple of them. So it's like they don't have the time to go put the attributes on everything. And they don't know what customers want. So I built this tool. And I'll show you the navigator part first. And I did, just for Bill, I added all the project server endpoints.
Thank you.
Yeah. So what you see here is every single attribute that is exposed as an endpoint shows up in here. So behind the scenes, I actually am doing Reflector. This is running on a SharePoint box and a project server box. And I'm doing a lot of reflection. And so what you'll end up seeing, I've got all the project server endpoints in here. So we say projects draft. We select it. The little JSON postback happens here, and we see here's all the possible methods that you can do off of that endpoint. So we say we want to do an add. Okay, it tells me this is a draft project. It actually gives me where I need to post to. And it tells me the name of the parameter and what its type is. Okay? We'll get a second. If you click View Example, this is all alpha type of stuff, but if you click View Example, what I'm going to do is I'm going to generate your JSON for you to hit the endpoint. I'm going to generate the CSOM for you, the JSON, and I'm going to generate the CSOM XML. Ooh, CSOM XML, what are you talking about? Well, Bill had a little slide, there was a little slide in there, and it says client.sbc/process query. If you find out you can't do something in REST, you can't do it in the CSOM, you can go to this, rather than using the .NET client or the JSON client stuff.
Well, that would be using the CSOM.
So, as you can see here, it generates everything for you. Again, this is Alpha tool. I'm trying to build this out, and show you things. So you have the endpoint there. You have the actual parameter you could post. Here's your CSOM. This is the CSOM XML part of it. Okay? Lovely. Awesome. Now, the type ID that I was saying, this is important because what will end up happening on the back end is that type ID, when it gets passed to the endpoint, it will look at that, it will find an ID method, and it instantiates that object for you on the server side. And then you can actually just call any methods, and cool yours. You're now running internal, so you can run internal methods. Okay, but this is very advanced operation, and I did not say any of that.
Well,
and he's going to say this is don't do.
That's actually a little bit different. What this does is this gives you access to anything that isn't exposed via REST.
Yes.
So, but it's still the CSOM endpoint. You still can't, try and elevate privileges or anything. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I'd have to check to be sure, but I think that what it does is it uses UTF-8, and that it, and then for the entitization in the XML you need, I'm not sure. I think it will use XML entities for that, but I would have, or C data is the other possibility.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Okay, good. One of the last things I'm going to show you here, I just did a search for anything that is in any of the APIs that exist across all of SharePoint and all of Project Server. And I just looked up the SP Web class. You'll see here that now I'm telling you what methods are exposed via the client targets. In this case, this would be exposed by a REST. It's going to be exposed by a client, JSON. It's all. All right. If you scroll down, you'll see some of them is only RESTful. You won't find it in the CSOM. Right? So there are some cases. Martin brought up a good one the other day. If there's something that you want the engineering team to do. Well, I built this tool for the documentation people, and I built it for us so that we could all vote on what we want them to add the attributes. You can just go in here, click vote, and it'll take you over to a little page, and you'll say, yep, it would be nice if this was exposed by all of them. Do your little thing, because I don't want you to go right in some tool and you're just like go and cause disaster through my results. But the results will pop up on here, and one of the things that Martin pointed out is export web part is not actually available. It would be really helpful, right? You get the XML off of a web part page. That's not available anywhere in the thing. I agree. I think that would be an awesome one to add. So if you find something, you want to add it, do it. And I'm going to pass this off to engineering, and they'll look at it and hopefully add the attributes, right? So that's the tool. Use it. It's awesome. It's going to help you, right, to find everything. And we're...
With using the query XML, what's that going to do to your validation on the store, for instance?
I don't know. I don't even...
I don't expect it would be, no. You're emulating the
CSOM.
client proxy when you do that. So it's really no different from using the JSOM as far as the app is concerned.
All right, so that was all the demo stuff, and now we have back to Bill and some very cool remote event handlers.
All right. So, remote event handlers. Many of you are probably already familiar with event handlers on-prem. The way they work is you install an assembly into the GAC on the machine, and you register the assembly name and the endpoint that you want to be invoked when the event fires. Obviously, you can't do that online. We can't let you put your stuff in our GAC. So we came up with remote event handlers. The way that these work is you create a WCF endpoint that's accessible to the internet or to the on-prem server that you're trying to use this with. And you register that endpoint instead of the strong name assembly and class name. Something important to note here is that you can use remote event handlers online or on-prem with Project Server 2013. And we did extend the PSI WCF service and the central admin UI, which allow you to register these to support the remote endpoints in addition to the local event handlers on-prem. So there are a lot of assemblies that you're going to need. Most of them are the same as if you were using local event handlers. So you're going to need the most important one here is the server events receivers assembly. That has all of the interfaces and the base classes that you'll want to use. There's the library, which has a bunch of enums and structs and types that you will probably be referenced in some of these, in some of the event handlers that you'll want to implement.
And you're going to find that library. You're going to use it in your REST and CSOM stuff too.
Yeah. There is one little pro tip there that I like to mention. I like to use the REST endpoint to query the available event handlers rather than taking a reference to the library assembly just for the event IDs. All they are is integers, so you can look them up. You can even do it at runtime. Then there's the schema assembly. This one's a little tricky to get because it's only there in the GAC on an on-prem Project Server install. But that has all of the typed data sets that are going to be passed as arguments, particularly on pre-events. And finally, if you're going to call back into Project Server as part of your event handler, you're going to want to have the CSOM client assembly. So the steps that you'll need to follow to put this all together are you're going to have the WCF service endpoint. The easiest way, as Ludo said, engineers are lazy, so I'm always looking for the easiest way. The easiest way I found is to use the web app in Visual Studio and tell it that I want to add a SharePoint remote event receiver and it'll go ahead and set up the service for me. All I have to do is substitute the base class for the interface. And then once you have your WCF service up and running, you need to configure the actual event handler on the service to point to it. When you do register it, you have a couple of ways to correlate event handlers from different sources. If you're using CSOM, then you can give it a unique event handler UID, and that's a good way to look up who's calling you. If you're developing a provider-hosted app where you have a single static endpoint that lots of different tenants might be calling into, then you can use the PS context info SB site GUID to get it. So, very basic example. First step is inherit from one of these base classes in the event receivers assembly, override the event that you're interested in handling, and if it's a pre-event and you need to validate something before you decide whether or not it's going to be canceled, you can cancel it. You give it a reason string that'll show up in the logs, I believe, and then you return the event args. And let's see, can we go ahead and, all right. So this is an example of handling one of these events. So this is the lookup table event receiver that I was talking about. Just since this app gets called from lots of different contexts, it gets called anonymously as a event handler, and it gets called when you go to the landing page of the app and so on. I have all of the logic for figuring out these tokens and such embedded in this context info class. The key part here is on updating remote. I'm just overriding the base implementation. I'm inspecting the data set to see what's changed. And then I'm using CSOM to find the table by the app alternate ID that I installed it with, and then seeing if I should allow that event. And if I don't, I go ahead and cancel it and return that error. I also have one for deleting, which does something similar. It blocks deleting what I call the locked table in this app. Oh, whoops, wrong screen. Oh, sorry, I didn't do this one. And here's an example of what it looks like in code to register with CSOM. A couple of things to point out here. The cancel on error flag, I've set it to true for this demo. However, it does default to false in CSOM, which, as I recall, is the opposite of what the PSIs do. And I'll get into that some more later. The event ID is one of those PS event ID arguments from, enum values from the library or from the REST endpoint if you want to get them that way. So there are a couple of caveats to be aware of when you're dealing with remote event handlers. Namely, they can easily time out, especially if you are going to make calls back into project server and you're going to make a lot of heavy updates or wait on a queue job. That's probably not a good idea. And you have to be careful if you are going to cancel a pre-event. This is true for local event handlers as well, but with the addition of timing out the call, counting as an error, it's actually a lot more likely to happen and unintentionally cancel pre-events for remote event handlers. So be careful deciding if you need to actually cancel any pre-events. So, okay, let's see. Actually, no, it is in the slides. Yeah. So I screenshotted the demo just so that we could go through it more quickly. Here we have our demo site, and I have a couple of other apps that I installed there. There's cheeseburgers. And here's a little app that I whipped up in the Napa tool. Incidentally, if you are developing JSON apps, then that's a great bootstrap tool to just get something up and running very quickly. And so I go ahead and go to the PWA instance, and I go to the Add an App page. And I've already installed the app, so it says I can't install it again. I go ahead and go to the site contents, click on the app, and it navigates to the Azure website that hosts my auto-hosted remote event receiver, or remote event handler app. So the first event in here, just to call out, is I got the SharePoint app installed event. And that's where I provisioned the lookup tables and the event handlers. So now I'm going to try and delete this lookup table, which I'm not supposed to be able to delete. And I got called back with the event handler on deleting remote, and it blocked deleting the locked name table. Then I'm going to go and try and add a value to the locked name table. That's supposed to be allowed. So on updating remote, did not block it, it just exited. Next, I'm going to go ahead and try and add a value to frozen values. And this one is supposed to be blocked. So when I hit save, on updating remote, blocked updating frozen values. And this is what the user sees. It's sort of a cryptic error message, but your lookup table is protected in this case. The other thing to point out in this UI is that the lookup table is still checked out at this point, so the user would ideally hit cancel and check it back in behind the scenes. That applies if you're going to be canceling local event handlers as well. So,
let's try and get it because I want you to do your last part there. Okay, so got that back on. So authentication scenarios. So we're showing you a lot of stuff, and we're a little bit late here, and he has some really cool things I want to show at the end. So I'm going to do this part really quick. So for me, I think auth is really easy. But that is not the consensus in the developer community. A lot of people are like, how do I do the OAuth? How does that work? So there's a lot of different ways of which you can do authentication scenarios with connecting to SharePoint, connecting project server. And the first thing is we look at is on-premise. When we talk about the auth scenarios, there's a lot of different things that we could do. We could do these auto-hosted apps. We could do the provider-hosted apps. When we do it with on-prem, the auto-hosted app sitting in Azure doesn't really work that well at all. When we look at the provider-hosted apps, we call those high trust. And when you want to create a provider-hosted app on-prem, it basically means you're writing a web service, maybe like Bill just showed with the event handlers and things, and you've got to be able to auth back. You got at some point you want to call back to SharePoint, you want to call back to project server. And when you look at the documentation, it says, oh, you really need to go and do the certificate thing, right? You create your app with a certificate, you make SharePoint trusted, and then you can make these calls back and forth. Okay, fair enough, right? I'm going to keep it with that in this case. If we talk about Project Online, well, okay, yay, those are really easy. I go deploy a provider-hosted app as the Azure works, and the communication happens kind of automatically for us. You don't really have to worry about it. But behind the scenes, I'm going to get to this, what is the real core of what you have to do when you build this app and you're making these calls. In case of like when you publish that app, well, I'll just say it right now. When it comes down to it and you want to make a call, you have to pass the fedauth token. Okay, when you log on, you'll see a little cookie. Or sorry, I said token. A cookie comes back to you. It has fedauth in it. Or when you do it in an app, it's a bearer token. That's it. That's all you have to think in terms of building an app. As long as you make a call back to SharePoint, back to Project Online, and you have one of those two things in there, yay, it's going to work. Now the issue is getting the fedauth token, cookie and getting the bearer token, right? That's where things kind of get a little complicated. When we talk about doing these provider-hosted and Azure-hosted, you use the token helper, and it kind of abstracts everything away from you. You don't have to bother with it. But a lot of us kind of look at it and say, well, I want to write some tools for this. Does that mean I have to use a token helper? And how do I pass a username password? Or how do I log on as an app from my little guy without using token helper? And so, again, for me, I look at it and go, this should be like crazy easy. This is simple, right? So the idea is that when you look at all the app models, you say there's an auto-hosted, there's a provider-hosted, there's SharePoint-hosted, right? There are a lot of different things that I have blogged about that says, look, if you don't want to use the app model, then don't, okay? If you can get away with simply logging on with the username and password and getting the fed-off cookie, do it, right? Make it easy. Make it easy on yourself, right? And then same thing for PSI calls. Great, wonderful. Obviously, I mean, that app could be anywhere. You could put it anywhere and make the calls back to people. But as far as deploying it out to individuals, you're probably going to sit there and say, oh, you know, I would like to put it in the store, or I would like people to have some kind of management around it. Well, okay, put it in an app package wrapper and push it out. And I'm like I said, I'm going to, that was one of the things that we missed in the slides there.
No, I think that.
Oh, it's in the next sets. Okay.
Yeah, the poll.
One of the things, and I was going to do a demo, and I was going to show you in the code that when I do my tool and it's doing the migration, I'm making the REST API calls. It's not an app. I mean, it's an app, but it's not a SharePoint app. It's not a hosted app. It's not a provider app. I'm making the actual auth call, and you know what? I am going to show it to you just for.
So while
giggles.
Chris is logging in, this login method is particularly appropriate if you're dealing with a client application, for instance, that's using REST, and you can show a web page for the user to log in. Do it that way.
In this case, like in my code for this migration that I did, I have a nice little thing called a SharePoint system. It says whether it's OS 365 or not. If it's not, okay, what kind of auth mode do you want to do? All right, and you go over and you say, oh, I could do Windows, I could do Forms, Live ID, ADFS. The goal is not, don't get confused about how you're going to package it. Don't get confused about this particular thing. The simplicity of it. Fed-off cookie, bearer token. As long as you have that, you can make whatever API calls you want. Okay, that's the goal to get to. So with that, I have a method when I instantiate and I set the context of the calls where I want it to go, whether I'm going on-prem or O365. There's a process. Everything's HTTP. If you go Fire Fiddler and you watch logging in through O365 and you watch the series of things that occur, replicate it. Just use Fiddler, go through. So this is what I've done. I've replicated the whole thing. You hit the endpoint, you do a little get, you go and say, okay, you got to get this little special thing called MSP OK. You post that back, you get a couple other little things, you pass your password, and what you end up getting back, you get a little T guy, you post that back, and then there's your fed off. Once you have that, you're golden. Whether it's in an app, whether it's like that's been deployed through the app model, or here, okay? Once you have that, it's golden. Now, one of the things I talk about, don't go and take that and then go pass it off to, other places, or don't send it over the wire so it's unencrypted, right? Because if someone gets it, they can run as your user, you can run as your app, they can do all that stuff, right? So it is ideal if you do any type of apps and you're making call to these HTTP endpoints, it should always be over SSL, okay? Because that's always getting passed, whether it's the bearer or the fed off. You got a question?
So could we use this kind of methods to do impersonation? That's not.
It's not really impersonation in that case because you've actually logged in as that user with their password.
And
Do you want to do like we did in the past, support impersonation or run emulated privileges to do some stuff that the user doesn't have, right? Like bring resource data. Is there any supported way to do that?
Well, so there are a couple of ways you could do that. If you're dealing with like a service-to-service app, like an auto-hosted or provider-hosted app, you could save the context token of that user launching your app.
yes.
And then you can use that to get back in as that user. The other way is, of course, if you have saved credentials, you could use this method to call PSIs or to call the REST endpoints.
Yeah. So
Administrator, I'm now, I have to use the token and I want to see stuff that user doesn't have access to, like bring phone numbers and just resources.
you got right. We look at the different types of apps, and here's a perfect outlay of non-app model. You have to have username password of somebody, something. So if you want to do a tool that migrates from point A to point B, it has to be admin. It has to be admin, right? If you want to impersonate the user, that's the whole point of OAuth. Mm-hmm. You get that token, and when you make the calls, you're doing it on behalf of the user. If your app doesn't need that,
With all of the permission checks for that
Yeah.
user. Yeah.
If your app doesn't need that, then don't use the app model. Just go back to logging on, get the fed-auth cookie. Don't make it hard on yourself, okay? Don't do it. If you do have to impersonate the user and make calls on their behalf, you're going to be going to the bearer token. And you're going to have to pass that, which means they have to authorize your app, and you have to package it, whether it's provider, auto-hosted, or SharePoint hosted. So then we're going to skip this for the sake of time. So the question is then, well, I'll skip that for 2. The question is then push or pull, okay? If you're going to log on as the user, okay, that's one thing. That means they got to give you a password. We're going to frown on that. You don't ask the anything you try to post to the store, it's not going to get approved. You're not going to be able to ask them for a password. So one of the things when you look at the whole notion of provider-hosted app, you go, oh, in Visual Studio, you fire up and you say, oh, it gives you the 3 options, right? It makes you think provider-hosted means that I have my web server sitting somewhere over here, not on the SharePoint box, and that's the way you have to do it. No, you don't have to do it that way. If you can get away with it, always go with the SharePoint-hosted app. Okay? Now, what means can I get away with it? Push versus pull. Okay? Is the SharePoint-hosted app able to do a request to your service, and everything happens in the logic, and everything it needs comes back? Okay? If that's the case in your app and what you're doing, SharePoint-hosted. Okay? Period. If you find that your app has to actually make a request back to SharePoint, and a request, an HTTP request, now you're not going to be able to do the SharePoint hosted. I mean, you can, but it's tough. And that means also that your app has to be able to hit your endpoints, right? A lot of people are like, we're not exposing our SharePoint to the internet. Internal on-prem? Yeah, right? I know a few of those, right? So that you have to think about that. If it's totally just, and in the case of the tool, I'm changing the SP REST voting tool to a SharePoint app. And what it's going to do is just simply makes a call back to my servers, sends me the path that you want me to generate everything for, and then the response comes back. Done. Yay. Provider hosted. Now then you're asking yourself, well, what about the cross-domain stuff? Coors, not the beer in Denver. Okay. CORS, you could say, equals true in the jQuery. Yay. Good deal. Right? Or there's another option, and we'll just kind of skip to it here. If you do the core stuff on my server where you have the web app, you have to put those headers. And if you don't put those headers in IIS, then it's just going to barf on you. It's going to say, no, you can't do that. The other way is SP Web Proxy, which is what Bill uses in his Cheeseburgers app. How many people have seen Cheeseburgers? It's awesome. Yes, it's so funny.
It was one of the first apps in the store.
It was. It is awesome. And I ranked it high. I ranked all the apps in the App Store, by the way. So one of the other things you can do, if you find that you can't support cores because it's a browser thing, IE10 supports it. If your organization doesn't have IE10, you're not going to be able to do cores. Okay, you'll have to upgrade them all first. If you find that your organization doesn't have IE10, well, you can use this, right? And what this does is it says, I want to make a request. Okay, and you think about terms of like going back to the host web. This is a similar notion. But you want to go out to your server sitting on the internet somewhere and make a request to it. So it sends a request down to SharePoint. SharePoint does it on your behalf. So there's none of this browser weirdness going on, right? And it sends it out. Now the thing is that it's limited to 200K response. So if you're doing things like downloading files and images and stuff, okay, that's not going to work. But I did a blog post that shows you how to increase that and make it big. Now it'll go up to 2 gigs, but honestly, having SharePoint do all this crazy stuff for you, probably not the best idea. But again, these are ways, if you can get away with it, most of your apps is likely going to be SharePoint-hosted app. And you're going to use one of these methods. Don't even bother going to provider. Don't do auto-hosted. I mean, you can if you want to.
The provider takes care of this cross.
It'll take care of some of this stuff. But if you can get it, there's plenty of options to just say, I just want to do a SharePoint-hosted. It's so easy, right? And then there's none of this full trust, low trust, high trust, none of that, right? It's just installs. It's done. So we'll skip kind of past that. So you can go back, look at these slides, but this kind of gives you kind of a flow chart of the decision process I just outlined. Do you need to run as a user? No? Okay, just use the basic auth. Do the forms post that I did. Get the fed-auth cookie. Yay. If you do need to run as a user, use an app model. Okay? Do you have reliable hardware to run the network on? No. Use auto-hosted. Provision it to Azure. This is the simplistic aspect of it, right? I'm making it real simple. Does your application support push? Yes, then just use either CORS or the web proxy. If you need to pull data from SharePoint, you're going to be switching over to the other. Yeah.
Have to ask a question. What about the smartphone support regarding cores and stuff like that? If you want to do something from the smartphone, full smartphone support for that?
I don't know. I haven't got into that part. I haven't tested them all out. I have no idea.
So you'd probably work with a proxy web server.
Yeah, you'd fall back to that. Absolutely. There's always a way around it. Always a way around stuff. Okay, so I already said all this stuff. We've already had all those things. I was going to do talking about getting apps and stuff set up, but for time purposes and stuff, we're going to show you Bill's app, and it is awesome. It's kind of a productivity killer, but it's a good productivity killer.
Right. So this is Cheeseburgers. It installs as a SharePoint hosted app, and so it creates its own app web there. And this is just on our demo site. The key thing about it is it's getting all of its data from some public RSS feeds of images, and then reformatting it all with CSS and so on, and just representing it.
Looks like a tribble.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a tribble.
And as Chris was saying, this uses exclusively the SP request executor to get the data
Web
from
proxy, right?
Yeah,
SP web proxy.
yeah.
Yeah. So he's those calls and everything are actually going off to not to that app web URL, not to
Right.
the host web URL, but other places to get all those images and do all of it. And he's taking advantage of the SP web proxy to do it.
Mm-hmm. So
It's a fun app. You know, it's free, right?
yeah, it's
You were
free.
nice enough not to charge people for it.
I don't own the content.
Oh yeah, okay, true. Yeah, you probably get trouble with that.
And the other part of it here is I also created a little app part here.
Sorry.
Well, actually, it's having trouble loading. I think maybe the network is a little slow. Okay. Well, anyway,
So if you
a
want
little
really,
slideshow that you can embed elsewhere in the outside of the app.
So basically, if you want really funny stuff on your team site, and you want to laugh every day when you come in, it's totally different content. There you go.
All right.
All right, cats. Okay, so last part.
Right.
Oh, here you go.
So project server app packaging. Let's see. So when we think of project server apps, we're not thinking as much about the type of app that's more independent of the server, like Cheeseburgers. We're actually thinking more along the lines of customizations and features added onto the server. So the app packaging for project server adds the ability to package entities such as custom fields, stages, workflows, and EPTs, and deploy them to project server from the marketplace. So the first step to creating an app package is to declare these entities as an XML feature. And then when you're ready, you deploy that feature just like any SharePoint feature would be deployed. So this slide's a little dense, and I'm going to go through it fairly quickly so that we can get to the demo part. You get this project server entity module, and you add your element file to it, and it conforms to the schema in PS entity provision.xsd. And then you have to set up the feature receivers.
What's that 16 there?
Yes, I'm glad you asked.
Yeah.
Because Project Online is always the most up-to-date version, the strong name of the assembly in Project Online is actually using version 16. So just something to be aware of, that you should check the strong name of the assembly before you package your app and distribute it. So deploying project server entities in a solution, it's basically the same as packaging a WSP would be for SharePoint in the past. You declare your entities, and then you install it and activate the feature. If you're packaging it as an app, then the activation is a little bit more complicated. The problem is that the default activation logic doesn't run as an administrator in project server. It runs as a different service account. So what you have to do is you have to set the feature to not activate by default, and then you need to add logic to the to the first app launch or to the app installed event receiver, which will go ahead and run it as the admin who is actually installing the app. And this is a project server admin, not necessarily a site collection admin or something. So in general, if you can package your entities, then do so, because installation from this XML file is much more, is much faster and less likely to time out than if you actually have code in your page that goes and uses CSOM or the REST endpoints to do so. You can hook the app on installing event and use that to remove and clean up entities, but you'll probably have references left behind, which means it's likely to fail doing that. You probably want to just leave the entities there and remove whatever event receivers or event handlers you had and so on. The features are actually installed into the sub web, the app web for the app, and not in the host web, which means that if you want to do something like reference a workflow or a project detail page, you're going to have to hoist those out into the host web from the app web. So here's the example of some project server entities. I'm declaring an EPT, or an enterprise project type. So first I declare some stages and a phase for the stages to go in. And this is all according to this schema. This XSD file comes with the Project 2013 SDK. So it helps to add that in there, then you get IntelliSense. I add it to this module. It is important that the module name starts with project server entity. And down here, I have to tweak the EPT definition a little bit to make it work, since the workflow needs to be hoisted before it can be associated. So the installation steps are activate this feature, which creates the EPT. It creates it with only a single enterprise project type PDP, or project detail page, and it is managed to false, which makes it's actually, when it starts out, a SharePoint project, a SharePoint task list project type. And that's because there are some conflicting requirements between having a workflow, not having a workflow, and being a managed or unmanaged type project. So this is the XAML workflow. I actually created this in SharePoint Designer, and then I used CSOM to extract just the XAML of the workflow. And here's the first feature, which I'm going to install. This one does activate by default, and it includes all of the content that I need, the element files and things like that I need to get onto the server. And these are all going to go into the app web. And then here's my second feature. This one does not activate by default, and this one just includes the project server entities. And here's where I set the remote event, or the feature receiver properties. This is the default page that loads. You can see I needed to include the workflow services script and the request executor script so that I can access the host web for the hoisting. And of course, the project server script there at the bottom. So when the page loads, the first thing it does is it takes the hard-coded feature ID of the project server entities and it activates it. Once that query completes, I go ahead and I get the app web and I find the template XML file that I provisioned for the workflow. I have to get that and create a workflow definition using the workflow JSON. Once that's been published, I have to create a subscription to that workflow. This is, in previous versions, this was called the workflow association. There's a blog post, if you search for creating project server workflows in Visual Studio, you'll find a description of properties that you need to set. All of this is doing is making it so that the project server or Project Online will recognize it as a project workflow and not just a SharePoint workflow. So we set the source event ID, or the event source ID, we set the event types it responds to, and we set these properties and just leave them empty. Then we also need to find the history list ID and the task list ID and set those properties. Once the workflow is published and ready, we can associate it with the enterprise project type. So I go ahead and I set is managed to true, and I set the workflow association ID to the subscription ID that I just created. And I do all of that in one go, in one batch, using the update method here. And by the time it gets through here, my APT is ready to go. So here's the PWA site. I already installed it. And so if I go to PWA and select New Project, you can see my package DPT there. So I'm going to go ahead and make a demo project and wait a little while the workflow processes and so on. And voila, I have a packaged workflow enabled enterprise project.
Very cool.
And you can see down here it entered the stage, and I was able to log to the history list for the workflow down there. So,
Very nice. How many, he's talking about a lot of this, and I didn't realize there was, until about a month or so ago, that you could actually deploy enterprise entities like this. How many of you knew this?
no one.
Pretty awesome, right?
Yeah.
I was like, all right, I want to blaze through all this stuff because this was pretty cool. Right.
All right. So to summarize, we have a wide variety of APIs that you can choose from depending on what you need to do and what your target platforms are. The REST architecture builds on top of the SharePoint REST architecture and has many of the same uses and abilities as the SharePoint REST architecture. You can use remote event handlers to access, to get notifications of things that are happening without having to install any code on the actual project server. And the app model allows you to publish all sorts of extensions to either SharePoint or project server, or both online versions. And make sure that you pick the right app model for your requirements. The simpler, the better. SharePoint hosted, for instance, is probably good enough for most scenarios.
So we'll do a little questions. I have one question for you because I have a book to give out. So those of you that were actually paying attention to some things, this is our contact info. So if you guys have other questions, we'll be around for a little while. We knew it was going to be right on there, so yeah. we're okay with taking some of the next guy's time, but don't tell them I said that. So I have a question. I'm going to give away this book. This is a architecture book. It's a brand new SharePoint 2013. I was the technical editor for this. It's a very, very good book. I have my football. I'm just going to kind of do a little Hail Mary pass up on the top, and whoever gets it gets the chance to possibly answer the question. If you don't get it right, you're passing the football off, okay? So here we go. I'm just going to throw it up. Bam. Oh, look at that. 8 points for Denver. All right, so the question is, what is the default limit for the SP web proxy in its response? 9. He says 100. You're passing the football. All right. 200. All right. You had to have the football, all right? So there you go. Good job. But I want my football back. All right, so we'll be here. We'll be up here. We can answer some questions for a little while. You can come up. Feel free to ask.
There are a couple of mics there in the aisles.
Yeah. There you go.
Thank you.